Hello, Tritons, whether you're a new Triton or a returning one.
Welcome to Fall Quarter.
We are thrilled to be here
to support you wherever you are on your journey.
ISPO is here for you.
Whether you are in this time zone
or somewhere else around the world.
Many of you will be joining us from your home countries,
while some are on campus or down the street.
We are here for you.
We are ready to connect with you
to make sure that you have the support you need.
This quarter is unlike any before and likely any to come.
Just know that no matter the challenges you face,
we are here to support you.
So as you prepare to start your courses, just remember,
we are a phone call, email, or Zoom meeting away.
ISPO is here for you.
ISPO is here for you.
Welcome to Fall Quarter.
Hello and welcome to all of our newly admitted Tritons for Fall 2020. Whether you are joining us from inside of the United States or from the other side of the world, on behalf of the International Students and Programs Office, also known as ISPO, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you may be. My name is Grace Fuller, and I'm the Manager of Student Experience and Engagement here at ISPO. A few things before we begin. First, you'll note that you are in listen-only mode, so you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. Additionally, we are recording, so you'll be able to view this webinar at a later date at iwebinars.ucsd.edu. And finally, we encourage you to ask questions. And you can ask questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit those questions. Additionally, you can contact us and ask further questions at icontact.ucsd.edu. And we are happy to welcome you to our session, Meet ISPO and Understand Your Immigration Documents. And with that, I'm going to introduce my counterpart, Pauline de Guzman, the Manager of Student Services here at ISPO. So Pauline, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Hi, Grace. Thanks so much for introducing me. I'm so excited to meet everyone here today, and I hope you're all well and that you've got a nice cup of coffee or a cup of tea to join us this morning. Today's agenda is great and full, so we'll get started right away here. Today's session is an introduction to the International Students and Programs Office, also known as ISPO here at UC San Diego. Also, during today's session, you'll gain a better understanding of your immigration documents. Throughout our presentation, I will be testing you all, so pay attention, and if you have any questions, feel free to either use our Q&A chat feature and also locate the raise hand icon on your screen to stay engaged. So let's go ahead and let's get started here. Okay, so as our video mentioned, ISPO is here for you. We know that this quarter will be unlike any other quarter. So as you prepare to start your programs, know that ISPO is your one stop for questions and resources. We have 20 friendly advisors, administrative staff, and student assistants who are ready to help you. ISPO can advise you on understanding your immigration status, rules for working on and off campus, traveling, and on how to navigate academic adjustments and campus life. Another form of advising that ISPO does is programming or hosting events. This could be in person when the time comes or virtually. So these events or programs help you create the best experience while studying here at UC San Diego. So I want to give you all an idea and a snapshot of who are international students here. Who are you joining? In fall of 2019, UC San Diego had a total of 37,634 enrolled students. Of that group, roughly 8,842 were international, so about a fourth of UC San Diego's total population. Of the 8,842, roughly 5,358 are undergraduate students with our top major as economics, and 3,484 were graduate students with our top department being computer science. Now, after international students complete their program here in the US, they may be eligible for post-completion work, or basically working after graduation. Currently, we have about 2,287 international students who have already completed their program, are now alumni of UC San Diego, and are working here in the US. Our total service population is about 97% F1 students, so those studying on an F1 visa. While we have about 400 or so students, which is roughly 3% on a J1 visa, mainly through our EAP reciprocity programs. So as you can see, ISPO's service population is quite large. We have about 8,842 new and continuing students, and a total of about 2,287 alumni who are here working in the US. So at any given time during the year, we have roughly 11,000 students that our office serves. Now, ISPO is not the only office on campus who will help you during your program. If you're an undergraduate student, familiarize yourself with your college advisor. So your college advisor's academic advising office can be found on your college's website. So make sure that as you begin your program, you know how to locate and contact them. Now, if you're a graduate student, this would be your graduate coordinator, and they are within your department. Now, your college advisor and your graduate coordinator will help you navigate making progress during your program, especially if you're outside of the US as you transition from fully remote courses here in the fall quarter to an in-person course come winter or spring of next year. You can also rely on your professors in your classes and faculty in your department. Lastly, there are other offices on campus that can help you during your program. Now, sometimes if you ask a question as simple as, can I study part-time this quarter? Now, that requires that you communicate not only with ISPO, but perhaps your college or graduate coordinator, and maybe the office of the registrar. So as you can see, your support system at UC San Diego is made up of various units on campus, not just ISPO. This fall quarter, each unit may prefer different ways to communicate with you. While some choose Zoom videos, others might prefer to communicate by email or through the Virtual Advising Center, otherwise known as VAC. Now, you've all logged into our iPortal, which is ISPO's online document request system. And now this is how ISPO intakes your requests. So if you need something from ISPO, like updating your immigration documents, your Form I-20 or your DS 2019, perhaps you need a new travel signature or support letters, you will be logging into ISPO's iPortal. iportal.ucsd.edu. Hopefully you've all requested your initial Form I-20s or DS 2019, so you're all familiar with our iPortal and have a sense of how to submit these requests. Throughout your program here, you'll be submitting various requests, not just this initial I-20 request. And so you'll access iPortal the same way. We have various services where you can make changes to your update a new travel signature, make changes to your major, and so forth. And those instructions on how to submit certain requests are available on ISPO's website. So make sure whenever you need to make updates that you visit ISPO's website at istudents.ucsd.edu, which will then lead you to the correct service in iPortal. So there's a question, and I know a lot of our newly admitted students sometimes get confused. Does ISPO issue everything, right? So for an example, can you obtain a social security number, your SSN, from ISPO? Here at UC San Diego, there are quite a few offices and units. However, it's really important when requesting something to understand who is the final approver, right? Who is going to give me the final authorization or the final document? That will help you to figure out where you need to go. So as an example, can you obtain a social security number, otherwise known as an SSN? Here are some brief steps on how to obtain your SSN. The first is you need to find employment. So you'll get an offer letter from your employer, whether it be a UC San Diego department or maybe anywhere off campus once you gain work authorization. You'll then log into ISPO's iPortal and request a SSN support letter. Okay, so ISPO will then issue you a support letter. Then you'll take your offer letter and ISPO support letter, and you'll then go to the Social Security Administration. This is a building off campus, the government office, where you'll then submit your SSN application, submit support letter and your employer offer letter, and then you'll wait for your card in the mail. So briefly, no, your SSN is issued to you by the Social Security Administration, not ISPO. So it's important as you request documents and other things here during your program that you really ask yourself, who is the final approver? And if you do have any questions, I see that we've already received a few. Please use the Q&A feature here in your Zoom panel to submit those questions. Okay, so now we'll jump into your immigration documents. If you have your documents with you today, feel free to take them out and we can review them together. Now, your immigration documents are extremely important. You'll use them during your program to apply for things like work authorization, a driver's license, a bank account, your social security number, and other benefits. So it's important to make sure that they're up to date and that you understand what each document is used for. To test your knowledge about your immigration documents, let's watch a short video.
I think I can throw away past immigration documents like my I-20 and DS 2019 if I get updated ones.
Okay, so use the raise hand icon. Let me know what you think. If you think this is true, you can throw away your documents. Go ahead and raise your hand. Aha, so this myth is actually false. So you definitely should not throw away any of your immigration documents. Okay, good job. So let's take a look at your documents now. As we've just learned, keeping all copies of your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from ISPO and also every other institution you've attended here in the US is important. You'll never know when you'll need them in the future. You should keep all of your documents valid and up to date, and we'll learn about the validity of each of your documents today. It's also a good idea to take photos of your documents and keep digital copies on your phone so they're always accessible. And lastly, each time you enter the US, remember to do a document self-check. So we'll do a document self-check together today, and so that you know exactly what to look for when reviewing your immigration documents. Okay, the first document we'll look at together is your passport. So if you have that, go ahead and open it up to your passport biographical page. Okay, you always want to review this document to make sure that it's valid and up to date. You'll see your biographical information, and you'll also note the expiration date. Your passport must be valid for at least 6 months into the future. Okay, so sometime in November of 2029, if your passport expires in 2030, you want to make sure that you try to renew your passport. A renewal of your passport can take some time. It can take various weeks, several weeks, excuse me. And so you want to make sure that you don't delay a renewal of your passport. If your passport expires or is nearing expiration, you can renew your passport inside or outside of the US at your country's embassy or consulate. Okay, as I mentioned, this can take a little bit of time, so make sure that you do it at least 6 months or so before it expires. Okay, our next document is your US visa. So this page should be located inside of your passport. Now, if you are outside of the US and you have not yet applied for your F1 or J1 visa, then you will not have this document. However, once you are issued a F1 or J1 visa and you're preparing to enter the US, there are a couple things that you want to note about your visa. The first is that your visa is like a key. You only need a valid visa or a valid key to enter the US. However, once you're inside of the US, it's okay if you no longer have the key or a valid visa, as long as you are maintaining your status. And we'll talk about what that means later. You can remain in the US. Ensure your biographical information is correct. Also, note the number of entries, which lets you know how many times you can enter the US. M stands for multiple times. So during the validity of your visa, you can exit and enter the US multiple times. Or if it says S, that means you can only enter the US a single time or one time during the validity of your visa. Of course, note that expiration date. So let's look at the validity of your visa. If your visa expires, it can only be renewed outside of the US at a US embassy or consulate. A lot of our students ask, my visa expired, do I have to leave the US to renew it? Or is there a way I can renew it here inside of the US? And so, unfortunately, unlike your passport biographical page, your US visa can only be renewed outside of the US at a US embassy or consulate. Okay, let's take a look at a scenario here. You're inside of the US and you notice that your F1 visa is expiring in 2 months, which happens to be in the middle of the fall quarter. Can you remain in the US legally? Okay, so let's think about that one. As we've just reviewed, your visa is like a key. So you only need it to be valid when you enter the US. However, remember, if it expires while you're here in the US, you do not need to leave the US in the middle of the fall quarter to renew it. You can stay here as long as you're maintaining your status, maintaining your F1 and J1 status, following all the rules under your visa status, and it's okay to remain in the US with an expired passport. However, next time you do decide to leave the US, so perhaps during winter break, you want to go home and visit family. Then, in order to resume classes in the winter, you do need to go back to a US embassy or a US consulate outside of the US and renew or apply for a new visa to enter. Okay. So that's our visa. We've gone over your passport and your visa. And again, you might not have a visa, but you can always review this session later and double check how to look at your visa once you do have it. Okay, our next document is our Form I-20. So if you are joining us on an F1 visa, then you will be issued a Form I-20, and you should have already received one by requesting it through the iPortal. Now, there are some important things to note on your Form I-20, and we'll be referencing this throughout your program, so it's important to know where to look. All right. On your Form I-20 in the middle under Program of Study, you'll note your education level, your major and so forth, and also this yellow box here, which is your program start and end date. So you'll see here that it will show a fall quarter start date and an expected program end date. So here you are expecting to graduate sometime around spring quarter of 2025. But however, this is only an expected program end date. Okay. If you need more time to complete your program, so if you find out around 2025 that you need an extra year, you need to make sure that you extend your program end date. So you'll log into the iPortal and request a program extension before June 30th of 2025. If this date passes, then we are unable to extend your program end date. So it's really, really important that you plan ahead, note that program end date on your I-20 now, and remember that if you need to extend your program, you must do it before the date listed. Okay, you might also request an updated I-20 from ISPO if you change your program level. So if you complete an undergraduate degree and start a new graduate program at UC San Diego, maybe you might change majors during your program. You might even get married and change your biographical information in your name, or you might request a travel signature. Okay, we'll talk about what a travel signature means also. This is your Form I-20, and so it's really important to note those specific pieces. Now, ISPO won't automatically just issue you a new I-20 when any of these events happen. You need to request an updated I-20 by logging into the iPortal. If any of these changes happen, you should submit a request in the iPortal for an updated I-20 within 10 days. So let's take a look at your travel signature. Now, you need a valid travel signature in order to re-enter the US. You don't need a valid travel signature to leave. However, before you depart the US for vacation or travel, you want to make sure that you know what documents you need to re-enter the US. One of those documents will be a Form I-20 with a valid travel signature. On the second page of your Form I-20, you'll see this area called Travel Endorsement, and it will have a signature on it. So it could be my name, since I am your designated school official. Okay, it might have my title, my signature, and it'll also have this line for date issued. Now, this travel signature, since I issued it on August 10th, 2020, is valid for 1 year. Okay, so as long as you use this I-20 with this travel signature to re-enter the US before August 10th, 2021, it will remain valid. However, if you are planning to enter the US, let's say in December of 2021, then it will no longer be valid since it expires. It's only valid for 1 year. So you want to log into the iPortal and request a new travel signature. We'll then provide you an updated I-20 with a new signature on the second page. Okay, so it's really, really important that you know where to locate your travel signature. Okay. So we have another scenario here that we want to go over. What would you do? The expected program end date listed on your Form I-20 is June 30th, 2022. You realize you're actually completing your program early in December of 2021. Does this mean you can maintain your status, hang out and travel, and stay in the US without any enrollment, without any classes until June 30th of 2022? So a lot of our students, right, they look at their program dates on their I-20 and they think, I'm going to finish early. I can just stay here and hang out the rest of the time. So unfortunately, this is only an expected program end date. So this doesn't actually reflect when you can remain in the US until. If you finish your program early, it means that once you finish that program and it's your last quarter of enrollment, that that is actually your program end date, despite what is listed on your Form I-20. Once you are nearing the completion of your final of your program, or you're nearing your final quarter, you want to reach out to ISPO. Talk to us about what your next steps are. We can help you plan ahead and figure out what you need to do to prepare for your next step after you complete your program of study here at UC San Diego. Okay. So for our J1 students, and excuse me, there's a typo here. This should say Form DS 2019 for our J1 students. The same areas also, you'll have your program dates, and you will have your travel endorsement or travel signature area. So it's the same thing. Make sure that you keep these areas or these documents up to date, and that you submit requests to ISPO through the iPortal to make sure they remain updated. Okay. So for those of you who have dependents, whether it be a spouse or a child, they may have been issued a F2 dependent I-20 or a J2 dependent DS 2019. So whenever you make changes to your immigration documents, it will also reflect on their documents. If you need to make updates to their documents, you can also request updates through the iPortal. Now, our next document is your arrival or departure record, otherwise known as your electronic Form I-94. This document will only be generated upon arrival to the US. So for some of you who have not yet traveled to the US, you have not yet arrived, you might not have this document. However, once you do arrive, it's important to generate it to show what your status is here in the US. You can generate your electronic Form I-94 online about 24 to 48 hours upon arrival by visiting i94.cbp.dhs.gov. Once you log on to that website, it'll ask you for some biographical information, as well as information on when, your biographical information from your passport. So make sure that you have your passport handy when filling out your Form I-94. Once you input all of your information, you'll be able to print your electronic Form I-94. Okay, it'll be a PDF, and it's good to make sure that you always print this document out or keep an electronic copy on your phone. Now, there are some important things to note on your Form I-94, okay? And the first that I want to point out is your class of admission. So make sure that your class of admission is correct, that it says either F1 or J1, whichever visa type you hold. Also, note your admit until date. This should always state duration of status or D/S, okay? If there is a date listed, let's say the date says December 30th of 2020. That means that you need to depart the US before December 30th of 2020. And that is likely an administrative error by Border Patrol. You definitely want to make sure that there is no date listed here and that it states D/S. Also make sure your name and biographical information are correct. If you are reviewing your Form I-94 and you notice that there are issues or errors on your document, this is manually inputted by a human, so there may be errors from time to time. Reach out to ISPO, talk to an advisor, and we can point you in the right direction to get this document updated and corrected. Okay. We also have address reporting requirements. Though this is not a document that you receive or keep up to date, ISPO does continually update your Form I-20 and your CVIS record, which has all of your biographical information and program information that really feeds into your Form I-20 or DS 2019. We update it with your most current either local US address or update your permanent address. So though we will not issue you an updated I-20, this information is important to keep up to date. Visit Triton Link at tritonlink.ucsd.edu and report within 10 days of any address change, your local US address, so where you live here in San Diego if you've already arrived. Also keep up to date your foreign address, so where do you plan to return to back home upon completion of your program and your studies here in the US. And then there's also a tab for emergency contact. So you want to make sure that you have an emergency contact on file, whether it be a friend or roommate or someone here in the US or even a family member back home. So I know that fall quarter is a bit different for this academic year because many of you are joining us remotely from outside of the US. So if you are outside of the US this fall, you can actually update your current address in Triton Link and use a foreign address. So we want to make sure whatever is listed as your current address in Triton Link reflects where you are physically residing, whether that be here in the US or in your home country outside of the US. There are some specific instructions on how to correctly enter your foreign address within Triton Link, so make sure that you reference those instructions when updating those address fields. Okay, so that's a brief look at your immigration documents, and I know that we've received really great questions. And so I'm happy to answer some of those a little bit later in the presentation for you today. Now, if we are not able to get to your questions today, or as I've mentioned throughout our presentation, you want to clarify or look over your documents specifically with a ISPO advisor, you can always contact an advisor and chat with an ISPO advisor through Zoom. You can find different ways to contact ISPO through icontact.ucsd.edu. Again, I welcome you to join us for walk-in or Zoom-in advising hours. We also have appointments. Every week, we also host weekly webinars. During your program here, we'll host topics such as applying for work authorization on campus, off campus. So make sure that you look out for announcements, weekly announcements regarding those. And also we have a contact form on our website if you want to submit it, and an advisor should get back to you shortly. All right, so I'd like to thank you all for your time and listening to me today. I'm so excited to meet you all, whether it be on campus or perhaps next year. And I wish you all the best, and as you start your first quarter here at UC San Diego. So Grace, I'll pass it back to you.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the events or different programs that you can meet fellow international students. So the first thing I want to highlight is our I-orientation meetups. A huge part of international orientation is meeting new people, and meetups are hosted by students for students. Interest meetups are a place where you can connect with fellow Tritons who share similar interests. And regional meetups are hosted by students to get in touch with other students from their own region and give them advice for studying as an international student at UC San Diego. So if you're interested in meeting other students who share similar interests or who might be based in your same region, check out iorientationucsd.com/meetup. The link, as you can see on the screen. Okay, so the next thing I want to highlight is our I-Events calendar. And if you want to know what's happening at UC San Diego all year long, I encourage you to check out this calendar and possibly bookmark it as a page on your web browser. Our I-Events calendar is a live calendar, so that means it's updated continuously, and it features globally engaged events hosted by both student orgs as well as campus departments at UC San Diego throughout the year. So make sure to check out ievents.ucsd.edu for the latest. And then finally, the last thing I want to highlight is iPrograms. So iEvents lists all of the events that are coming up in order of how recent they'll be occurring. But if you want to learn more about the programs themselves, then iprograms.ucsd.edu is a great way to get an introduction to each of the programs. So each one of these programs is a program that ISPO offers, and you can have a better understanding of maybe what you want to get more involved in during your first year at UC San Diego. We look forward to seeing you at a various program. All right, so it looks like we have some time for some questions that you put in the Q&A feature. So I encourage you, we'll be answering some questions live right now. And so if you have additional questions, please use that feature. And then like Pauline said, if we run out of time, you can always fill out icontact.ucsd.edu. But Pauline, I have a great question from the chat. And a student would like to know, how can I renew my visa inside the US?
Okay, so that's a great question, Grace. So we went over this in our presentation a bit earlier, but your US visa can only be renewed outside of the US at a US embassy or consulate. So there is actually no way to renew your visa inside of the US. However, remember that even if your visa expires while you're here inside of the US, you don't need to leave if you're maintaining your F1 or J1 status. So I hope that answers that question.
All right, we have another question that asks, if I am Canadian, I only need an activated I-20 and not a passport US visa, correct?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have a lot of Canadian citizens joining us this fall quarter. That's correct. You do not need to apply for a F1 or a J1 visa from a U.S. embassy or a U.S. consulate. If you are a Canadian citizen, you can use the Form I-20 or Form DS 2019 that was issued to you by ISPO to seek entry at our U.S. borders.
All right, Pauline, we have another great question. The student asks, if I will enter another university in the US, should I leave the US to get another visa?
That is a great question. So if you are currently attending a different institution in the US and your last date of enrollment, or perhaps your last date of post-completion training through F1 OPT was within 5 months of when you started your classes here at UC San Diego and of when you will start your classes here at UC San Diego in the fall, you actually are able to remain in the US. You do not need to depart the US. So you are likely going to do what's called a CVIS transfer. You're going to transfer your CVIS record from your first institution to UC San Diego as long as there's no more than a 5-month gap. And so, you do not need to leave the US and apply for a new visa. So I know that a lot of our students also ask, when I transfer school, so I completed my undergraduate studies at UCLA, I'm now doing graduate studies here at UC San Diego. However, my visa actually says UCLA's name on there. Is that okay? Yes, the answer is yes, because if you transfer your CVIS record, if you note in your visa, there is a CVIS number, which starts with an N00. That should be the same CVIS number that UC San Diego issues you as well. So despite the fact that you're attending a different school, as long as that CVIS number does remain the same, there is no need to apply for a new visa. Okay.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
We have another student who is asking, they're in the process of applying for their US visa.
Mm-hmm.
In the field meant for person to contact as well as address, whose name and details from UC San Diego can I mention?
Okay, so that's a great question. On our website, you can visit inewstudents.ucsd.edu inewstudent.ucsd.edu, we do have some information about applying for your visa interview and filling out those fields. So if you take a look at your Form I-20 or your Form DS-2019, you'll see the DSO's name who issued your document. You can feel free to use their name, and our contact information is available at inewstudent.ucsd.edu as well.
Another great question, Pauline. A student asks, do we need to complete the Form I-94 each time upon arrival to the US?
Yes, great question. So yes, definitely. Every time you enter the US, you want to make sure that you generate a new and updated I-94. This is known as your arrival and departure record. So each time you enter the US, you want to check that you're here in valid F1 or J1 status and that the admit until date remains D/S. As we went over earlier, if there is a date after the field admit until date, that means you need to leave by that date. So you want to make sure that you're always in the US in a valid and in the correct status. So it takes seconds. Go ahead and go online and always generate your Form I-94. That was a great question.
Pauline, we have another great question asking, how should I prepare for my F1 visa interview?
Yeah, that's a great one. So I know that for some of our pre-arrival webinars, we host some on, applying for your US visa, understanding that process. We also have some really useful tips on our website about how to apply for a US visa, the questions they might ask, how to respond, and how to prepare for them. So I do all encourage you all to visit our website, inewstudent.ucsd.edu, and review those helpful tips.
I have a question that I actually can answer. So I'm seeing that there's quite a few questions about the links for the various social events as well as the meetups. So if you head to iorientationucsd.com, that is our orientation website. And on the register tab, you can see all of the different registration links for the social events. And on the meetups tab, you can find all of the different links to register for the meetups. I'll go ahead and share that via the chat as well, but that is a one-stop shop where you can find all of the links for the various meetups and events during international orientation. Pauline, we have another question, and the student is asking, can I travel within the US with an F1 or J1 visa?
Yeah, great question. So I encourage you all to visit itravel.ucsd.edu, and we go over what documents you need to carry when traveling inside of the US and also traveling internationally outside of the US. It's important to remember that your US visa is an entry document, and so you only need it to enter the US. Your US visa, even if it expires, you're allowed to remain in the US as long as you're maintaining your Form I-20 or your Form DS-2019. You don't need it to be valid in order to travel within the US. You only need it to be valid when you're outside of the US and seeking entry into the US. That's a great question. And again, yeah, please visit itravel.ucsd.edu.
Okay, we have another question, future-oriented, love it. A student is asking, how long can I stay in the US after graduation?
Yes, great question. So this is a plug for another orientation session that I hope you've all registered for, whether it's called Know the Rules, inside of the US or outside of the US, depending on where you are. I encourage you all to attend and register for and attend that session. We go over validity of your stay here in the US. But to provide a short answer. Upon graduation, so once you complete your program of study, and that can be the last date of your final quarter at UC San Diego, or perhaps your comprehensive exam or defense date for graduate students. On that date, you then have what's called a grace period. Now, this period of time allows you to stay in the US and kind of figure out and plan what your next steps are. Some of those things might be planning to depart the US, selling your car, packing all your clothes up, figuring out how you're going to get your dog back home with you. You can also change your education level. So if you're inside of the US and you're attending an undergraduate degree here at UC San Diego, you can also, and you've been admitted into a graduate program, we can adjust your I-20 so that you can begin your graduate program. You can also change status, or perhaps you can transfer to another school here in the US to begin a new program of study. Now, your grace period depends on your visa type. So if you are an F1 student, you have a 60-day grace period. If you are a J1 student, you have a 30-day grace period. Before the end of your grace period, you do need to finalize your plans and take action. If at the end of your grace period, you do not take any action, then your F1 or your J1 status will automatically complete.
Wonderful. So we have so many great questions today, and I hope that we were able to answer some of them live and that was helpful to you. But we also want to recommend that if you have further questions, you can see that on our screen. You can attend Zoom-in advising hours via icontact.ucsd.edu, and you can also ask further questions that way via the contact form or by emailing our office. But just some final reminders that we'd love to leave you with. You can head to iorientation.ucsd.edu to register for other sessions, events, and meetups. And as well, I really want to highlight that at the end of this session, you will receive a survey. It's really important that you fill out this survey. This will complete your attendance for this session, and it will also just let us know how we can better serve you. This is the first time that we have international orientation completely online, and so we want to make sure if there are any tips and tricks that we can do to improve your experience, we'll definitely do that. And finally, just make sure to check out iupdates.ucsd.edu for the most up-to-date information from ISPO. We understand that current events have been changing a lot of different information, and so that is a really easy website to get the latest information and to make sure you're up to date on all of the different transitions. So thank you so much for attending our session, Meet ISPO, and understand your important immigration documents. We hope that we see you at many more sessions, events, and meetups throughout international orientation. And finally, welcome, welcome, welcome to UC San Diego.